Plummy, and in this episode of Plummy's Thoughts Zone, I'm gonna be sharing my thoughts on a couple of games that were revealed at the recent Game Awards. And I was actually not really planning to do a video like this, like I was not waiting for games that I was interested in to talk about at the Game Awards or anything. I just saw from people who were watching the Game Awards and reacting to the Game Awards that there were a couple of games that actually I'm interested in, and that has been all I've been able to think about for the last few days. So I decided to just sit down and do a video and talk to you guys about them because I just can't stop thinking about it. And there's 3 games that I want to talk about in this video, and it's mostly 2 that I'm going to be focusing about. The third one is just going to be kind of like something that I just want to mention that I'm interested in. And I'd say we should probably get away with that one first because it's the least I have to talk about. So the first game, or the game that I'm least interested in a way at the moment, is the review of Alan Wake 2. Alan Wake is a game that I plan on playing at some point in the future. I haven't interested in playing that game because I've heard a lot of good things about it. I've heard that it's a popular game, it's an adventure game, so that is right up my alley. But I just haven't had the time to do it because there's so many games that I want to play through on my channel, especially, and just don't really get to play that many games on my channel because I do many different types of content. But I'm really excited about it because it seems that it's going to be really leaning in some horror elements, which makes me wonder whether the first one leans into that. And please don't spoil it in the comments if you know, because I would like to have a clean experience of that game whenever I do get to play it. But I'm just really excited because the game looks amazing. And yeah, it just seems like it's gonna be a really fun game. But I ultimately don't really have anything to say about it because the game also seems to be very early in development, so there's no plot or anything that they revealed. So I just don't really have much to say. On the other hand, the other 2 games that were revealed at the Game Awards, those being The Expanse and Star Trek Resurgence, I have quite a lot to say about those games. So before we get into my thoughts on these 2 games, we should first kind of establish a little bit of a context surrounding them. Because some of you may not know, but these games are Telltale games. And if you guys don't know who Telltale is, basically, to cut a long story short, I'll try to kind of do it as concise as possible. Telltale Games is a company that was created by former LucasArts developers after LucasArts decided that they were going to stop doing point-and-click adventure games. And these developers were really passionate about those kind of games and were feeling really sad that the company was moving away from those type of games, which made the company what it was. So they decided to break off and make their own company, Telltale Games. And in the early 2000s, they made some really great iconic games like Sam & Max. They made 3 games about Sam & Max, which, by the way, those games are currently being remastered by a company created by former Telltale developers, some of which are the same who created the original Telltale, and they're called Skunk Ape Games now, and they are remastering all 3 games. So that is really cool. But other games that the Telltale made in the early 2000s that were really awesome were Back to the Future. They made a Jurassic Park game. They made a bunch of other games based on kind of like a little somewhat obscure IPs that maybe 80s or 90s kids would know, but not necessarily most of us being aware of. But they made some really good games, is the point I'm trying to make. But they didn't really hit the mainstream level of popularity with their games until they did The Walking Dead. But the thing is, that kind of ended up being the downfall of the company as well, because before The Walking Dead, most of their games were genuinely point-and-click adventure games with a lot of gameplay in them and story, obviously, but they were point-and-click adventure games. After that, with The Walking Dead and first kind of Jurassic Park, but The Walking Dead kind of polished up the concept of what they were doing there, they started doing more of narrative-driven episodic games, less so point-and-click adventure games. There was still a lot of point-and-clicking, obviously, in games like The Walking Dead Season 1, but with each successive games, it became more about quick time events and just pressing the buttons when the game tells you to, and less so about you actually kind of playing the game. It was more about watching an interactive movie than playing a video game. And combine that fact with the fact that they kept releasing like 5 games per year in the following like 4 or 5 years, and they saturated their market, didn't really improve their gameplay. It became less and less gameplay heavy and much more store heavy, and people are starting to get burned out and bored by their games. And combine that with the fact that behind the scenes, their CEO Kevin Brunner was a very toxic person with a toxic mentality, where he did not allow, he thought that they had struck a formula with the release of The Walking Dead Season 1, which, by the way, that game was so popular and so loved that it won at the Game Awards in 2012. It won Game of the Year and has sold, I believe, like 21 million episodes. Count that fact that it's like 5 episodes per season, and that means that 6 million people have played through the game. So that is pretty big for a company that was pretty obscure until that point. And the CEO's toxic mentality of refusal to change up the formula and innovate in any way, shape, or form, as well as trying to pump out as many licensed games based on licensed IPs like Game of Thrones, Guardians of the Galaxy, Batman, and all those other games that they made. And the company just saturated their market, had a shitty work policy, and had already kind of boring games in general. Because the stories of these games are not necessarily bad, it's just the gameplay that is kind of boring. And you can easily see how the company ended up destroying itself in a way. And the saddest thing is that right before the company shut down in 2018, a year prior, they kicked out the CEO. I think maybe they even kicked him out from the company, I'm not exactly sure, but he stopped being a CEO at that point. So the company and their games actually started improving because they stopped releasing like 5 games per year. And they actually started to innovate and improve their gameplay and story, and were even starting to drop their engine, which the company was using for these kind of games, which was notoriously buggy and hard to work with in a way. And you can even see it in the last 2 games that the company released, which was Batman Season 2 and Telltale's The Walking Dead final season, aka Season 4. Because Season 4, you can even see it in my playthrough that I've done on my channel, which was my first video. There were portions in the final season where you actually were playing like an actual game, where you had to kill walkers and not just click a bunch of buttons that the game was telling you to. You had to walk around, and it felt like a normal video game from a third-person perspective. You know, it wasn't just pick this dialogue option or click this to do this. There were obviously still those things, but there was actually some innovation inside of that. And for the second season of Batman, the final episode, from what I've heard, is literally completely different depending on your choices. Essentially, they've made 2 completely different episodes for the 5th episode. I don't know how true that is. I'll be really happy to find that out for myself in the future whenever I decide to play that game, because I have a huge interest to play that game now, as well as some of the other Telltale games like The Wolf Among Us and Back to the Future and Sam & Max. But you can see that the company was actually starting to improve with their games, but sadly, the games still were not selling that well, even with the improvements. And once they didn't have any more investors, the company was forced to shut down, and their workers were even let out without severance pay or anything, which is why the company is, I think, still technically being sued. But a year later, I think in mid-2019, somebody who had no relation to Telltale whatsoever bought essentially the brand and most of their IPs and resurrected the company. The company that resurrected Telltale is called SCG Entertainment, if you want to look for more information yourself, because I'm not sure I'm a good explainer. But essentially they resurrected the company because the CEO believes that the model for this company, there's some merit to it. There's some merit to the games that they were making, to having narrative-driven point-and-click adventure games. And he thinks that the reason why the company fell apart is because of the toxic management by the CEO, as well just market conditions. So he believes in the company, that's why he bought it. And essentially he resurrected the company. And even in 2019, they revealed a trailer, or teaser, should I say, for The Wolf Among Us 2 at the Game Awards. So this is probably something that most of you didn't realize. Somehow, because I've been looking through the comments for the Expanse trailers, and there's a surprising amount of people who didn't realize that Telltale is back. I mean, you can argue how much of the company is actually back, because it's essentially just the name and maybe some former employees, because the CEO did say that he was going to offer some former people jobs there, or at least freelance jobs with possibility of long-term jobs whenever they are able to do that. But yeah, they've supposedly been working on The Wolf Among Us since 2019 together with a studio called Ad Hoc, which is a studio formed by former Telltale employees. And honestly, it's really funny to me how many goddamn studios by former Telltale employees there are, because there's Ad Hoc, which is a studio formed by the people who worked on The Wolf Among Us 1, and they're working with the new Telltale on The Wolf Among Us 2. There's Skunk Ape Games, which I mentioned earlier, who are currently remastering Sam and Max, which is really cool, and I'm really excited to see what those games are about, really, because they seem fun. I've watched a little bit of it in like the remaster trailers I checked out, and they seem really fun games, which is why I've decided to play them. There's I think there's a studio called Night School or something, which made the game Oxenfree. You can search that up to see exactly the name of the studio, but that is also created by former Telltale developers. There's Campo Santo, who created the game Firewatch, and one of the creators is Sean Vanneman. He worked on the first season. And even the next game that I'm going to talk about, which is Star Trek Resurgence, is made by people who used to work at Telltale. And I'm actually worried a little bit about that game, because the CEO, that was the toxic CEO that led to the downfall of Telltale, is working on that game. He's the leader of that company, but we're going to get to that when we get to that. So yeah, we supposedly have a Telltale now working on The Wolf Among Us 2 for 2 years. Apparently we're gonna get some information about that and where they are in terms of the development of that game at the next issue of Game Informer, which is gonna be in like early next year. But I did not expect for them to reveal that they're gonna be working with Deck 9 on The Expanse. Because also, if you don't know who Deck 9 is, they've essentially taken over on the creating of new Life is Strange games after somewhat of a failure of the season 2 of Life is Strange, who was made by Dontnod. Because afterwards, Deck 9 made Before the Storm, which is a prequel to Life is Strange 1, and True Colors, which I guess it's a sequel, but it's also its separate thing. So essentially they've made spin-off Life is Strange games. So this is going to be their first project that is not related to Life is Strange, since they became Deck 9. And that is interesting. I still have not played Life is Strange True Colors, even though I personally have an interest in doing so, and will do it in the future. But I loved Before the Storm, so I'm actually really curious to see what they and the new Telltale are gonna do with The Expanse. Because the game from the trailer looks amazing. It looks better than any Telltale game has until this point, which makes sense because now the company is going to be using the Unreal Engine to do their games in. Because, as I said earlier, Telltale had its own engine called the Telltale engine, which was notoriously buggy and was criticized all the time. So now that they've moved to a different engine, the games should look better, while still obviously keeping some of the stylized looks to them. And I'm actually most curious how The Wolf Among Us 2 is going to look like, because I really love the look of The Wolf Among Us 1, and I'm curious whether they're going to manage to recapture that unique aesthetic even in the Unreal Engine. But seeing how the Expanse looks in the Unreal Engine definitely makes me hopeful for that, because it still looks stylized, but it looks so good. And supposedly that trailer was done in engine, so it's not like a cinematic trailer or where they CGI'd it or whatever. It's actually in engine, so that is very interesting and exciting. And I'm just curious to see how the company, these games are gonna feel like and look like, because essentially this game or The Wolf Among Us 2, depending on which game releases earlier, I honestly can't tell. I feel like those two games are gonna end up releasing not that far from each other. Those two games are essentially gonna set up whether Telltale is gonna succeed again or fail. Because if these games are a success, then that means we could get again some really cool games. We might actually get Stranger Things Telltale game, which is something that the older Telltale was actually starting to work on before they fell apart. So this could be really exciting if these games are successful. And I really like the look of this game, especially because it is a space game. And when I played Alien Isolation, that game looked very similar to what this trailer space looks like. And when I played, and I'm actually really into the looks of this game because it reminds me a lot of how Alien Isolation looked like, which when I played through that game, my favorite part of the game was actually the beginning, before you actually get to meet the alien, because you just get to explore this awesome looking spaceship. Like, it was such a beautiful looking game. And if this game is essentially like that as well, you get to actually walk around the ship and explore and look at this kind of stuff, I'll be so into it. But in general, I'm just excited because I love Telltale. I want the company to succeed. And the CEO seems to be like a cool guy who actually cares about the company and who cares about these games. And the best thing as well that is really cool about this new Telltale is that they're not going to be releasing the episodes months apart. They're actually working on all 5 episodes at the same time. They're still keeping the episodic structure, but they're still gonna they're not gonna release the episodes months apart like it was before, because before Telltale would do one episode, release it, then in the meantime work on the second episode, release it, work on the third episode, release it, etc. Because that way they could also kind of change the story depending on players' opinions and choices, which there's some merit to that idea as well, of releasing the episodes like that. But honestly, the choices that you make don't really end up affecting anything anyway too much, so I don't really think there's much of a reason to do that at this point. Personally, I'm a proponent of releasing the episodes weekly, because that's what the most recent game in this genre that I've really enjoyed did, that being the game Tell Me Why by Dontnod. And it's a great game, honestly, with a great story that I feel like anybody who likes these kind of games should play. I really enjoyed it. And especially if you're a fan of games like Life is Strange, I think it was a worthy successor in a way, even though it's not set in that universe. But it was a great game, and the episodes were released weekly, which allowed people to speculate and just have really cool discussions about it for 3 weeks to a month instead of just doing it at once, having a discussion for a week and be done. That's why I personally don't really like the binge idea. It's fine to binge if it's something that has been released a long time ago. Like in that case, I agree with the binging, but I don't think that's what the initial release should be like, because that way you don't really get to discuss things with people on like forums like Reddit or even for YouTube videos. You don't really get to do discussions for YouTube videos where you share your thoughts and share your predictions for the future. And I feel like that is something really cool. That's why I really liked Tell Me Why's release schedule, because after I finished each episode, even though I didn't really play them at release, but rather a few months after release, I think it was, I still, after finished the first episode, because I wasn't really feeling like playing the second episode, I could just go to the subreddit for Tell Me Why and read the discussions that people had about that episode. So I'm really hoping that they actually do that instead of just releasing all 5 episodes at once, because I feel like that is also going to allow them to build hype for the episode. But yeah, I don't know. I'm just really excited about this, and the fact that this game is also set into a pretty exciting franchise, kind of like The Walking Dead, but it's obviously very different. It's a space-themed show, which I actually have an interest in watching The Expanse at some point in the future, because I love sci-fi, if you didn't know. But there's just quite a lot of shows that I want to watch before I get into any new shows. So it's probably gonna be years before I even get to watch The Expanse. But I have an interest in checking out that show, and I guess this game might end up being my intro to that universe. So that's gonna be interesting, because from what I've heard, the character Kamina Drummer, who's supposed to be the main character of this game, is a fan favorite character from that show. So yeah, that's gonna be interesting. And now, on the other hand, we also have to talk about Star Trek Resurgence. The concept of a Star Trek game in this kind of style, where it's like choose your own adventure and everything, in my opinion, is the perfect choice for Star Trek, because Star Trek, at least old Trek, is very much this kind of universe where it's all about the discussions of morals and what is good and what is bad and what is right and what is wrong and everything. And I actually like that idea, but I personally haven't been a Star Trek fan ever. I'm more into Doctor Who, and Doctor Who is not unlike Star Trek in that regard. So I've always felt kinship with Trekkies. And I agree with Star Trek fans who complain about modern Star Trek, because that feels completely different compared to what even my non-Trekkie vision of what Star Trek should be. So I sympathize with Trekkies who complain about the current state of Star Trek, especially when you look at the current state of Doctor Who. I've even made some videos in that regard. But yeah, this genre of a game is perfect for Star Trek. So it's cool that we're going to be getting a game like that, and I'm definitely going to play it, which again, similarly to the Expanse game, might actually be the reason why I get into Star Trek. But there's a few things that I'm worried about when it comes to this game. The most major thing is the people working on it. Because again, like I mentioned earlier, this is made by a studio called Dramatic Labs. I'm not sure whether they're a studio or not, because on their website for this game it says that it's a collaboration of 20 former Telltale employees. So I don't know if it's just a collaboration for this game or they actually a studio or whatever. But that's who is making this game. And the supposed leader or CEO is the same guy who ruined the original Telltale, Kevin Brunner, the guy who had this toxic mentality of just following a formula for every single game that Telltale made, and refusing any innovation, even the tiniest of innovations in the games. So combine that with the fact that the game doesn't really look that great. When you compare it to The Expanse, Telltale game, it's like fucking night and day. And those two games both are made in the Unreal Engine, and one of them looks significantly older. So those two things really worry me because it really feels like the Star Trek game is made very much in the same formula, in the same way that the Telltale games used to be done before. Because it even though it's like done in the Unreal Engine, it still has the quirks that you would expect from like a Telltale game and the visuals that a Telltale game could look like. So it definitely feels and looks like a Telltale game, even though it's in the Unreal Engine. But I really hope that they've actually learned from the criticisms towards the company and they're not just doing the same thing again under a different name, because I would be severely disappointed. Because even in that case, the game is not gonna be probably necessarily bad, but it's not gonna be as good as the Expanse. Because like, I don't want this studio or new Telltale to fail. I love these kind of games. The more companies that make these kind of games, the better, in my opinion. But I just have a lot of worries when it comes to them, because it's also the CEO being involved in this. And there's no reason really to believe that he has wised up about it. So I'm just gonna hope for the best in the case that they're, and the possibility that they've actually would have learned from what ruined Telltale and they're not gonna follow those same footsteps. But yeah, I don't know, because the plot of the game seems like it's gonna be actually kind of cool, and it's gonna be again my gateway into Star Trek. But yeah, I don't know. And the thing is, that game is gonna be released much earlier than any of the new Telltale games, it seems like. Because this game is slated for a release in early 2022, if I remember correctly. So it's gonna release probably in either the first or the second quarter of 2022, while the Expanse is likely just starting to be worked on. So at the soonest, I can see the Expanse Telltale game being released maybe early 2023, but even that is probably pushing it, because The Wolf Among Us 2 has been worked on for 2 years now, and we still don't have anything on it. So, yeah, I don't know. But again, The Wolf Among Us is an IP that is owned by Telltale and doesn't really have couldn't really have any significant backing from outside sources, while the Expanse could very likely also be funded by somebody like Amazon, because it is an Amazon show after all. So maybe they are also pouring some money into that one, so that one's probably not gonna take as long as The Wolf Among Us. So, I don't know. But all in all, I'm excited for these games, all these games, because they're adventure games, and I love these kind of games. But I also have some worries. But yeah, what did you guys think about the review of these 3 games at the Game Awards? And in general, what do you think about Telltale coming back as a company and releasing more games, and for us getting essentially 2 completely different Telltale games by new Telltale and old Telltale in a way? This could be a great point for comparison. So I'm really curious, what do you guys think about Star Trek Resurgence and the Expanse Telltale game? So comment that down below. And yeah, before we end this video, I just want to give a huge shout out to my currently 2 patrons on Patreon, Omari Bridgman and Deadpool. Thank you guys for your support. I really appreciate it. It really means a lot to me. I hope you continue to support me for a long time, because I'm going to be bringing more and more content for you to enjoy for a long time. And now, before we end this video, I just want to talk about something to you guys very quickly, which some of you may or may have not noticed before or know about me, that being the fact that I am trans. And yes, this may come as shocking to some of you, because I don't really flaunt it that much on my channel, or at least I feel like I don't. Outside of like my K-pop reactions, which is where I feel like the most comfortable being myself like this. And yeah, I am in fact trans. I'm not necessarily full-on male to female, but I heavily want to transition to being pretty female. I do consider myself more non-binary though, or maybe gender fluid would be the best descriptor as well, because I do have occasional moments where I feel fine being like just a normal guy, but most of the time, like right now, I do feel very dysphoric. And that's why I'm asking you guys for any help that you can give me, because my situation right now, I don't really see any way outside of you guys' help. Because, and this is gonna be kept short and concise, I live with my parents. They're never going to accept me as a trans person. They just never will. And as a matter of fact, back when I started the YouTube channel, I was actually kind of slightly starting my transition back then, with like starting to grow out my hair. I even got to DIY HRT, but because my parents started noticing certain things, like my behavior had changed a lot and my clothes had changed a lot, I kind of had to stop doing that, because they were constantly nagging me about cutting my hair and just started to kind of be threatening in a certain way, and felt like they were ashamed of me and everything. And that just kind of stress just tired me out to the point where I just gave up. But as dysphoria goes, it just doesn't go away, you know. I still feel like this, and in fact, it's somewhat been intensifying again recently, so I just wanted to share this with you guys. And again, I would really appreciate any amount of support you can give me in regards to this, because I just don't see any way out of this. Because even if I moved out of my parents' house and got myself a job and everything, that's just not gonna work for long-term planning, because once I transition, it's like I probably will not be able to get myself a job, because my country is very transphobic. Nobody gives a shit about LGBT people at all. So there's not even much I can do even in terms of transitioning here. So yeah, I don't know. I just would appreciate any amount of support you can give me, be it monetarily or in any way otherwise. And this is not about boosting my channel or anything, or guilt-tripping you with my sob story. I just wanted to get this off my chest and make my subscribers aware of the situation that I am in, and that I would appreciate anything that you guys can help me out with. It would mean literally everything. Like, for example, a friend that I made after starting this YouTube channel, my good friend Yuri, has been helping me out a lot. And I genuinely might have not been here if it wasn't for him showing up and befriending me. So yeah, this just went a little bit longer than I intended, but I would just really appreciate anything you can support me with. That's kind of ultimately what I'm trying to say. And yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you did, please leave a like, subscribe. Also, check out the links in the description to my Twitter if you want to follow me over there, and to my Wattpad where I post my stories, because in addition to doing all these videos on my channel, I'm also a writer. And if you don't enjoy my stories, or you simply enjoy my videos, you can head over to my Ko-fi account or to my Patreon, where you can pledge support and help get the channel going, help support me so I can keep writing stories you enjoy. But if you don't want to do it, that's completely fine. You can still help me out in other ways, like liking this video, subscribing to the channel, and especially sharing this video with somebody who you think might enjoy it. And I think it's pretty much it for this video, so hopefully I'm gonna see you in the next one. Bye!